Okay, this is chapter 47 of 50 from the book Isaiah 53, and the day of the Lord, dictated to me by God, just as he dictated the Torah to Moses and the entirety of the Hebrew Bible to the various prophets. You know, Isaiah, he told him, commanded and directed him, write this down. And like the Israelites, they would have known that it would be impossible for Moses to know the information he put into the Torah. And clearly he talked to God, or he said he did. You know, they couldn't hear God. But part of his proof, it's not the three proofs that he took with him to Egypt. Just as he's given me three proofs today. And this is tops among them, these two books. There's also the life of God's righteous servant of Isaiah 53. And that would be me. My life, but God commanded and directed every single word, sentence, paragraph, chapter, title. It's all his. And he's responsible for these videos too. The day of the Lord is here. The Lord is here. And he needed a representation. That would be me. Chapter 47. David, shunned and despised. Psalm 69. In Isaiah 53, God's righteous servant is said to be despised, shunned, and held of no account by men, but ends up making the many righteous and receiving as his portion the many, and the multitude as his spoil. His portion, the many, that would be the many made righteous. So we're talking about people here. And the many becomes the multitude eventually. Psalm 69 reveals that, like God's righteous servant of Isaiah 53, King David, before he was king, was shunned and despised after his anointment by Samuel. This is 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 11. Then Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all the boys you have?" And he replied, "There is still the youngest. He is tending the flock." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send someone to bring him, for he will not sit down to eat until we will not sit down to eat until he gets here." So they sent and brought him. He was ruddy-cheeked, bright-eyed, and handsome. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Now, of course, only Samuel could hear this. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord gripped David from that day on. Samuel then set out for Ramah. The Spirit was strong upon him. He just became a man in divine beings with that anointment, just like the man, the righteous servant does in Isaiah 11. And there's plenty of videos on that. A good place to start is the chapter 39. I'm redoing the entirety of the book, and there's 50 chapters. Because about 2 years ago, at the beginning of COVID, is when we began doing the videos. God had me repost them so many times, you know, re-download, re-upload, that they've really have lost all their quality. It's hard to watch them, it's hard to hear them. But now we're getting close to finishing redoing them all. And if you're watching this particular video, you can see the quality is much better than some others you may have seen. Psalm 69, 1. For the leader on Shunned of David. Shunned. To the chief musician upon Shunned is a music direction to the leader of the temple choir, and most probably indicates the melody after or in the manner of. In brackets, authorized version upon, which the Psalms were to be sung. As the words now stand, they signify lilies, a testimony. And that's from Smith's Bible Dictionary. Verse 2, deliver me, O God. So this would be David. Deliver me, O God, for the waters have reached my neck. Verse 3, I am sinking into the slimy deep and find no foothold. I have come into the watery depths. The flood sweeps me away. Verse 4, I am weary with calling. My throat is dry. My eyes fail while I wait for God. Verse 5, more numerous than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without reason. Many are those who would destroy me, my treacherous enemies. Must I restore what I have not stolen? Now, breaking this down into midrash form, where you take a verse and you break it down in parts and give a commentary on it. Those who hate me without reason. Commentary. Must David deny? Wait a minute. No, that's wrong. Those who hate me without reason. David was God's anointed of Jesse to be king of the Israelites. But to others, he was David the lowly shepherd, who was said to be God's anointed king. Must I restore what I have not stolen? Commentary. Must David deny the anointment that was freely given to him by God? Verse 6. God, ye know my folly. My guilty deeds are not hidden from you. Midrash. My guilty deeds, like God's righteous servant, David is a sinner. That's verse, for the righteous servant, that's verse 12 of Isaiah 53. Verse 7. Let those who look to you, O Lord, God of hosts, not be disappointed on my account. Let those who seek you, O God of Israel, not be shamed because of me. Verse 8. It is for your sake that I have been reviled, that shame covers my face. Verse 9. I am a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my kin. In Psalm 110, verse 7, David says, indeed, I was born with iniquity. With sin, my mother conceived me. In the days of David, men had many wives and many concubines, as is well known with his son Solomon. The iniquity came from his father Jesse, fathering a child with a woman outside of the tribes. David's brothers were present at his anointment and passed over for the one born in iniquity. They witnessed the anointment, but could only hear the words of Samuel. They could not hear God tell Samuel, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. David became a stranger and an alien to his brothers and kin, as one born in iniquity, and as one said to be the anointed of God. If his brothers and kin believed he was the anointed of God to be king, they would have embraced him. Verse 10, my zeal for your house has been my undoing. The reproaches of those who revile you have fallen upon me. He's talking to God. Verse 11, when I wept and fasted, I was reviled for it. Midrash, when I wept and fasted, I was reviled for it. Commentary, when David cried and went without food in his shame, and his brothers and enemies assailed him with scornful and abusive language. Verse 12, I make sackcloth my garment. I become a byword among them. Verse 13, those who sit in the gate talk about me. I am the taunt of drunkards. Verse 14, as for me, may my prayer come to you, O Lord, at a favorable moment. O God, in your abundant faithfulness, answer me with your sure deliverance. Verse 15, rescue me from the mire. Let me not sink. Let me be rescued from my enemies and from the watery depths. Verse 16, let the flood waters not sweep me away. Let the deep not swallow me. Let the mouth of the pit not close over me. Midrash, in the mouth of the pit, it's basically, don't let the mouth of the pit not close over me. David is a lowly shepherd who was born in sin and is admittedly a sinner. God has anointed David to be king of all Israel, according to Samuel, and David feels as though he is living in a pit of shame and despair. Verse 17, answer me, O Lord, according to your great steadfastness. In accordance with your abundant mercy, turn to me. Verse 18, do not hide your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Answer me quickly. Verse 19, come near to me and redeem me. Free me from my enemies. Verse 20, you know my reproach, my shame, my disgrace. You are aware of all my foes. Midrash, you are aware of all my foes. God is absolute knowledge and absolute power, and he is his creation. That's how he describes himself. Absolute knowledge, absolute power, and he is his creation. Of all things and all people, he chooses to follow closely. That would include all naysayers and haters and enemies of his anointed one, David. Verse 21, reproach breaks my heart. I am in despair. I hope for consolation, but there is none. For comforters, but find none. Midrash, but find none. No one believes David is the anointed of God to be king of Israel, particularly his brothers. Verse 22, they give me gall for food. vinegar to quench my thirst. Verse 23, may their table be a trap for them, a snare for their allies. Midrash, may their table be a trap for them, a snare for their allies. Okay, commentary. May the haters and naysayers and enemies and those who shun David and shame him, and all those who believe in their talk and words and opinions about David, which is the table they have set for themselves against God's anointed one, be their undoing before God and when David is king. Verse 24, may their eyes grow dim so they cannot see. May their loins collapse continuously. Verse 25, pour out your wrath on them. May your blazing anger overtake them. Verse 26, may their encampments be desolate. May their tents stand empty. Verse 27, for they persecute those you have struck. They talk about the pain of those you have felt. Midrash, for they persecute those you have struck. Okay, commentary. They, the haters and naysayers and enemies and those who shun David and shame him, and all those who believe in their talk and words and opinions about David, persecute him for being the anointed of God. Most, if not all, do not believe God spoke to Samuel in his anointment of David. David feels as though God's anointment of him has been a physical blow to his life and feelings. Those would include others that had been anointed or selected by God as his prophets, whose words are rarely believed and heeded as the words of God and go through the same ordeal as David. They talk about the pain of those you have felt. Those would be men who failed or died in the name of the Lord. Verse 28. Add this to their guilt. Let them have no share of your beneficence. Verse 29. May they be erased from the book of life and not be inscribed with the righteous. Midrash, be erased from the book of life and not be inscribed with the righteous. A heavenly book in which the names of the righteous are inscribed. The erasure of a sinner's name from such a register is equivalent to death. According to the Talmud, it is open on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah itself is also known as the Day of Judgment, on which God opens the books of life and death, which are then sealed on Yom Kippur. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah usher in the 10 days of repentance, also known as the days of awe, which culminate in the major fast day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The scroll of remembrance, and you can put me into every one of these verses. Although I am not seeking I would not seek the kind of retribution that David does against his enemies, and because to me they just don't understand, and it's a hard thing to believe. You know, God's really here. He's really talking to them, man, again. Even though you say you believe it, religious people, even though you pray for Moshiach and believe it will happen, it's still, just like David's brothers, something that you just can't absorb. How could it be him? This lowly shepherd, our little brother, born in iniquity from the sins of his mother. How? It's not possible. It's not possible. And then they just let it go. But God had this psalm written a long, long time ago in antiquity. And it's having me read it right now. The scroll of remembrance in Malachi 3, verse 16, is not the book of life. And it says, in this vein have those who revered the Lord been talking to one another. The Lord has heard and noted it, and the scroll of remembrance has been written at his behest concerning those who revered the Lord and esteem his name. And on the day that I am preparing, said the Lord of hosts, they shall be my treasured possession. I will be tender toward them as a man is tender toward a son who ministers to him. And you shall come to see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between him who has served the Lord and him who has not served him. For lo, that day is at hand, burning like an oven. He's referring to the day of the Lord, which actually began in 1948 and will continue at a minimum to the end of my life. He's always with me and has been for 16 years when he first spoke to me at age 50. Though he was with me at birth, just never let me know, and orchestrated my life to fit the verses of Isaiah 53. The scroll of remembrance is about a special place in the heart of God for those who revere the Lord and esteem his name on the day of the Lord that he is preparing. Not a specific day, but the days of his righteous servant, who God sends before him with the angel of the new covenant to clear the way for his return. To make the many righteous who believe in him and listen to him and heed him is the representation of God who speaks and writes God's words, as Moses did. God must have followers of his righteous servant for the day of the Lord. No man alone can clear the way for the Lord. Verse 30, I am lowly and in pain. Your help, O God, keep me safe. Verse 31, I will extol God's name with song and exalt him with praise. Verse 32, that will please the Lord more than oxen, than bulls with horns and hooves. Verse 33, the lowly will see and rejoice. You are mindful of God, take heart. For the Lord listens to the needy and does not spurn his captives. Verse 35, heaven and earth shall extol him, the seas and all that moves in them. Verse 36, for God will deliver Zion and rebuild the cities of Judah. They shall live there and inherit it. Verse 37, the offspring of his servants. That would be Jacob, who became Israel, and today it would be the Jewish people. His servants, not righteous servants. Those who cherish his name shall dwell there. That's a very, for me particularly, that is a very most excellent song. Most excellent. Okay, next up is chapter 48. So I got 3 more to go. I'm going to try to get them done this tonight. It's actually early morning hours. And it's called The 12 Tribes of Israel Return to Judah. There are no 10 lost tribes. This is one you would like to listen to.